Alright, today we're upgrading brakes on a Civic HX to larger Integra brakes. And we're basically swapping the whole knuckle and brake setup. And we're going to show you what exactly that is. Okay, so everything here is going to be coming out. We're upgrading to the rotor is going to be larger. It's going from a 9.5 inch diameter to 10.3 inch. The caliper is going to be, the Integra caliper has a bigger piston. And then for the brake hose, this hose, which is the style that comes on all the non-EX models, so the HX, LX, DX, CX. This hose is not going to work because it mounts on the caliper at a different angle, so we're changing the hose. And besides that, everything else should be about the same. Alright, so now we're using a 32mm socket to get the axle nut off, because the axle is going to have to be removed from the knuckle in order to get the assembly off of the car. Okay, since we're taking the whole assembly off, really the only things we have left to do are taking off, well, we're going to disconnect the brake hose last, but first we're going to do the 3 ball joints. There's one at the top, and there's a lower ball joint down here at the bottom, and then there's the tie rod end that also needs to get removed. Okay, so the ball joints should have a cotter pin in there to keep the nut from backing out for safety. And what you basically want to do is I just try to get the pin to go, it's going to be wrapped around usually, so you want to straighten it out as much as you can so you can get it to start coming out, and then you can get your diagonal cutter and pull, and then it actually makes it pretty easy to remove the pin. Okay, so we got all our cotter pins removed, and then the nuts that hold the ball joints and the tie rod in are all 17mm. So I just want to take those out, so then you can go and use your ball joint tool to remove them. Okay, to knock the lower ball joint loose, this one might be in pretty tight. You can hit it with a hammer right here. There's a spot where you can kind of shock it loose, and then that can help to get it started. So when you go and put your ball joint tool in there, you want to get that pretty centered. Ooh, so easy. Okay, since we're gonna obviously have to disconnect the brake line, we don't want to lose too much fluid, so we're using a hose clamping tool to stop the flow of the fluid when we disconnect this line. Okay, so there's a 12mm bolt holding the brake hose to the knuckle here, so I'm going to take that one off. And then the bolt, the Banjo bolt that holds the brake line in, the brake hose, is a 14. So we're going to take that off. Oh, you can see it there. And get ready, because it's going to drip out some fluid. Gotta get the axle out. There's the lower ball joint stuck back in there. Okay, since the Integra brakes are basically designed the same as the older Civic, the 92 to 95, it's a little bit different. It uses this little additional bracket for the brake hose, so we're going to take that off of the original brakes and switch it over here. The Integra brake line just mounts directly to the knuckle here, but on the Civic 96 to 2000, the brake line mounts on the other side of the knuckle, and so that makes it so you have to reroute the hose a little bit, but I think that'll make more sense once we actually do it. Okay, so now using the aid of a jack, we're just gonna lift up the lower control arm so that it's easier to connect the upper control arm. That's good. Okay, so I'm just gonna tighten the nut on the upper control arm. Okay, for the torque spec, on the the tie rod and the upper and lower ball joints is supposed to be 29 foot-pounds approximately on top, 33 on the tie rod, and 36 on the lower ball joint. And then you also need to maybe slightly crank the nut to line up the hole so that you can put your cotter pin in. So small. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay, so once you've torqued your 3 nuts and put in your cotter pins, then we're going to swap out the brake line to the 96 to 2000 EX brake line. Okay, so we're going to use our flare nut wrench, 10mm, to get the brake line in this. Using all the brake fluids. I'll whack it with something. Okay, we're gonna attach the new brake line to the new caliper, and to help it seal, we're putting in new copper washers on either side of the brake fitting. There we go. I don't have my punch, so I gotta dent that in. Alright, so one issue that comes up that you definitely need to pay attention to is the caliper is probably going to want to rub on the wheel. If you have, these are HX 14-inch wheels, and there's a particular problem with those. So we're putting in a wheel spacer. It's about 1/4 of an inch, and it gives it enough room so that you don't have any issues with it. And the lug pattern, of course, is 4x100, so you want to make sure you get a spacer that works for that. And then we're going to bleed the brakes, and should be good to go.